Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Focus on Photography podcast with Rusty Brown. I'm Rusty, and I'm extremely excited to have you guys here. This week, I'm talking about finding your niche, right? And I have a couple of references that I want to use. If you go back to my episode 3, where I talked about gear, and then my most recent episode 4, where I talked about what is your why. Today, I'm going to be talking about niche photography, and I will be referencing both of those episodes. So, if you haven't had a chance to listen to those or to see them, I would encourage you to do so. Getting started here today, by definition, a niche is a specialty, a thing or type of photography you like, something you do very well in a particular type. In my last episode, I actually referenced several types of photography. These can all be considered niches: portrait, sports, wildlife, landscape, astrophotography, wedding, event photography, headshots, real estate photography, etc., etc. You get the point. Today, I'm going to list 6 thoughts that pertain to niche photography as I see them. Number 1, you don't have to specialize. Um, you don't need to have only one type of photography. You can enjoy many types of photography. Number 2, oftentimes the niche finds us, even when we try to pick the niche. So that means that, as you try different types of photography, you may find that you're really good at something and that something may not be in the niche you anticipated. Run with these, because if a niche finds you, it's because you're good at it. And whether or not you know it, this type of photography comes easily to you. As an example, you came here for portraits and you stumbled into wildlife photography and became fascinated with the challenges and the beauty of wildlife photography. This is one of the many things I think that makes photography so special, the endless opportunities within, especially in areas that may actually surprise you. Number 3, most niches have unique requirements that you need to be aware of. These could be equipment based, geography based, time of day based, wardrobe based, dependency based, cost based. There are a lot of different things that could drive the requirements of that niche. As an example, astrophotography is time of day based, location based, and equipment based. You have to be willing to be up late at night, 1, 2 in the morning, if you want to see the Milky Way. You have to maybe go to a particular location to capture said Milky Way at night. And you have to have a particular type of lens and photography equipment to make that happen. Studio portrait photography is equipment based and cost based when you consider the studio fees, right? Landscape photography is geography based for the most part. Wildlife photography is equipment based, geography based, time of day based. So the photography, as another example, I should say, the photography gear or equipment needed for wildlife is different than the gear that's needed for headshots. Be mindful of this as you look at the different niches and the different types of photography, because it's going to be important. Number 4, you can niche down yet still enjoy other types of photography. I'm a portrait, sports, studio model photographer. Recently, I've taken to bird photography, not as a niche, but just as an interest. And if you would have told me 2 years ago that I would be as into bird photography today as I am, I wouldn't have believed you. And while I do find it challenging, I've also found it to be a joy. But I don't consider myself a wildlife or birding photographer. Nor does the time that I spend in this new space lessen my joy for portrait and studio work. Does that make sense? So I'm spending time and I'm being challenged with wildlife photography as something new, but I still consider myself a particular type of photography simply because I'm open to both of those types, and I'm also open to learning a new skill set, which I've had to do with the birding photography. Number five, there are benefits and drawbacks to niching down and not niching down, right? So as a benefit, um, you become good, like really good. Um, when you immerse yourself into one specialty, it just becomes native to you and it shows in your work. The drawback, however, is you won't spend as much time trying other types of photography. Now, the benefit of not becoming a niche photographer is that you become extremely well-rounded in many types of photography. However, the drawback of not becoming a niche photographer is that you might not attain the level of expertise possible in any singular type of photography. In other words, you may be good in many, but not great in a single one, and it's something you have to be considerate of. Another drawback in that same space is that you may end up with lots of gear that isn't used very often. If you go back to what I said a moment ago about now I'm spending time with bird photography, one of the requirements of bird photography is a different type of lens. And for those of you watching, which this lens right here is a 200 to 600 millimeter lens that I had to make a conscious decision to purchase as I started exploring bird photography. It's an expensive lens, and I consider it something that's limited because in no other type of photography that I do today do I use that lens. I don't use it for basketball. I don't use it for studio work. I don't use it for model work. So when I say you may end up with lots of gear that isn't used very often, gear such as that lens is only going to get used when I go out to try to photograph some birds. You need to be aware of that. Number six, I think there are two keys to whether or not to niche down, right? First, if you go back to my last episode, what is your why? Understanding your personal why will become the baseline foundation to your photography. If you understand your why, it will lead you to the type or types of photography that interest you most. If your why is to become a sports photographer, you'll have to dive into all the elements of sports photography. It'll require a great deal of your time, energy, effort, and other things. And when this type of photography becomes second nature to you, it's then become a niche of yours. Second, and the opposite of that prior consideration, if you want to explore all photography has to offer, don't niche down. As you explore, let your curiosity guide you. Over time, you will know where you find joy, and that joy may not be with any one singular niche. As a hobbyist, joy is the key, right? If you're not having fun, even with the unique challenges that come with some types of photography, like birding, then don't waste your time on that type or that particular type of photography, I should say, because you're not going to get anything from it. To summarize, when you're having fun and experiencing joy, you'll spend more time than you're aware of in that space. Trust me, I've lost countless hours in the different areas of photography that I enjoy, and I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. Consequently, your skills in that area of photography will grow. A key takeaway here is that you can have fun, you can experience joy, whether you choose to niche or not. Me personally, I didn't come into photography seeking a niche. Over time, I learned what I was good at and what I liked and what I didn't like. I was good at weddings, but I didn't like shooting weddings. Even though they paid well, I didn't have joy there. So I don't shoot weddings anymore. And I only fell into portrait and studio and model work and sports photography because I was open to all types. And the more experiences I had in various types of photography, the more I naturally found myself spending more time in some areas than others. Before I realized it, as I found the space where I had the joy, I was also finding challenges there, and that's how I fell into those. So if you look at sports, for example, depending on what that sport is, there are a lot of challenges, but I still thought it was fun. And that combination of challenge and joy slash fun led me to become really good at some types of sports photography. Don't feel like you have to box yourself into a niche because you don't. But if you find yourself in a niche and you're enjoying that niche, own it. Let's say that one more time. Don't box yourself into a niche and don't feel like you need to be boxed into a niche because you don't. But if you find yourself in a niche and you're enjoying that niche, own it. Quick story. As a child, and I'm going to give a sports analogy because I do that a lot here. And if you follow my YouTube channel, Rusty Brown Photography, I do that as well. But as a child and throughout high school, I played multiple sports. Football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring. But that's just how things were with my generation. As I got older, I gravitated to basketball, but my true love was baseball. And the only reason I gravitated to basketball as an adult was because I was active duty military, and as I traveled around, it was much easier for me to get on a basketball team because there were more basketball courts than baseball fields. Now, I'm not talking about softball, fast pitch, or slow pitch. I'm a baseball player, and many places that I traveled did not have baseball for adults. So consequently, I spent a lot of time in basketball. Um, and that led to me being a coach, right? So as an adult, I coached high school basketball for a little over 25 years, and I loved it. One of the things that I would do every year was to put a kid who played varsity football on our basketball team, even if he wasn't the best basketball player. I actually learned this from Coach Izzo at Michigan State many years ago. I did this because his background in football made him tougher than the average kid, and I wanted a certain element of toughness on my team. And just speaking honestly, a lot of basketball only players weren't tough enough. But having a kid on there who's used to contact and being tough and playing football would impact the other kids to the point that we would actually be a tougher basketball team. Um, Today's generation, they don't do as my generation did, right? Today's generation seems to have a child focus on one sport and one sport only, and that really starts at an early age. Parents are deciding that their youngster is going to be the next LeBron James, so they have the kid in year-round basketball, and only basketball. They put the kids through individual strength and conditioning programs, specialized camps and clinics, individual one-on-one coaching programs, and such. And the kids never get to experience other sports. They never get to see what they might like better than the sport their parents chose for them. Through no fault of their own, they were placed in a niche and they have to accept those results, both good and bad. With that, here's a thought. Today, there are more than 350 NCAA Division One men's basketball teams. There are only 30 NBA teams. 30. So if each of those 350 plus college teams carries 15 players each per season, how many basketball players is that? It's 5,250. Yet the NBA draft only has two rounds, right? 30 teams. So 60 people will get drafted each year. 60. And many of those draft picks are going to come from overseas programs, especially in this day and age. So how many of the, you know, 5,250 potential NCAA kids do you think will land in the NBA? It's less than 1%, by the way. Yet they've spent their entire childhood in a niche. And with each progressive layer of that sport, the degree of talent got better while the number of roster spots got lower. Conversely, the National Football League has 7 rounds of their draft. The National Hockey League also has 7 rounds of a draft, and Major League Baseball has 20 rounds of a draft. Now, that's not to say that, the kid that was thrown into the I'm going to be the next LeBron James program would turn out to be a wonderful football player or hockey player or baseball player. But those other sports, if you believe that your child has aspirations to play at the pro level, offer more. The numbers favor that child more. I'll give you an example that has always resonated with me, with the quarterback Kyler Murray. Now, I believe that the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL have have released him recently, but I'm going to use Kyler as an example, and let's say as the most recent starting quarterback for the NFL Arizona Cardinals. Kyler was an amazing two-sport athlete. And he went to a high school called Allen High School, which is in Allen, Texas. Over the course of his high school career, Kyler Murray was 42 and 0, did not lose a game. Now, to give you some context here, there are certain states in the U.S. that are really heavily heavily focused on football. Texas is one such state. High schools in Texas have facilities and fields and programs that rival colleges in many areas. It's a big producer of football talent. So for Kyler to go 42 and 0 as a high schooler is amazing and it's significant. Consequently, I want to say it was 2018, I believe, at the University of Oklahoma, he won the Heisman Trophy as their quarterback, right? But what a lot of people don't know is that Kyler was just as good of a baseball player. And when the draft time came, he had to make a decision as to whether or not to go in the NFL or to go into Major League Baseball. As a side note, I was really pulling for him to go into baseball only because I looked at it like this. He was a starting center fielder on a major college baseball team, and he only played baseball in the off season for football. You understand what I'm saying? He never missed any of the football programs, camps, clinics, training when he was a quarterback at Oklahoma. But in his spare time, he played baseball. And just with that amount of effort, he's good enough to be a starting center fielder, batted 296, 297, stealing bases and such like that. So in my mind, I was thinking if you choose Major League Baseball as a pro sport to go into and can then devote all of your time to that, you would only get better. I also felt there was a lower chance of injury in baseball. And a longevity point of that is that, you can play 18, sometimes 20 years in Major League Baseball. A quarterback, no, it's just rare. But the point is, Kyler had choices. And I believe that because he was a multi-sport athlete, it made it easier for him to choose football. He didn't go into football because it was the only thing he knew or the only thing that he and his family put together. He went into football because of those two sports. He just loved it more. And I think that is a very good example of what can happen when you open yourself up to different opportunities, within that space. And if you want to talk about the single biggest difference between that example and photography as a hobbyist, it's that today in photography, you're not a child, right? You're not a kid anymore, and no one should be making the choice for you or the decision for you about whether or not to focus on one singular aspect of photography or many. And as you look at these opportunities, I think you should be open to them. I do know people who kind of go down these rabbit holes of the influencers they follow and decide, ooh, that's what I'm going to be without understanding what that means or giving themselves time in other particular types of photography. Um, you can make the decision, right, to take your time and look at many aspects of photography and then decide if one or many are your preference. So those are my thoughts on niching down, whether to niche down, why generationally I think that you should try them all before you make that decision. But I do understand where some photographers go all in on one. So I'd be curious to know, how you guys feel about it. Are you a niche photographer, or do you spend more time in various different types of photography? I don't think as a hobbyist, one is any better than the other. I honestly don't. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I do appreciate you, and I'm glad that you chose to stop by the Focus on Photography podcast. I hope you'll continue to do so. And if you're so inclined, please subscribe. It does mean a lot to the channel. Looking forward to talking to you guys next time. Take care.